Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. And we knew this day was going to come, and at the first sign of defeat, Callum's jumped ship already. No, I'm only joking. He's at Tesco working, and on this podcast this week, we will be using squad rotation. He will be back looking at the Hibs game, where hopefully the Dons bounce back. As on tonight's episode, or today's episode when you're listening, we will be reviewing the first league defeat of the season as the Dons slipped up in Paisley, going down 2-1 in St Mirren's Cup final. So congratulations to them on that imaginary trophy that they won. But Phil, you braved the weather to get to the Smysa Stadium. How was your journey, first of all?
Yeah, it was a bit of a long journey. Like I was saying to you before, it took about almost 2 hours between the outskirts of Edinburgh and Bathgate. But yeah, made it 10-3, surprisingly enough. So even without a altered kickoff time, we might have just made it. But yeah, sadly, the fair weather podcaster Callum's just away at the first sign of defeat. So that's unfortunate that it's just you and me.
It is, because I think there is, well, I don't know. I don't think we're going to be too negative on the defeat. I think, typical when this will be quite interesting. Obviously, you being at the game and me watching at home, and I think watching at home when you lose is a bit harder to take because you maybe don't get the sense of what the game was like in person. It was a very tough watch at time. But I want to just speak about the weather before we go on to speak about the game itself. Um, Obviously, you faced challenging conditions. The Aberdeen fans coming from Aberdeen faced challenging conditions. It looked to be specifically between Perth and Stirling, from what I could see on social media. Any thoughts from you around the game being called off? I know some fans said it should have been called off on Friday night with the forecast that was predicted for Saturday. I think St Mirren have got a few questions to answer themselves for why the coverings wasn't down, or at least the undersoil heating, and maybe need to look at their match day procedures to why staff went to the car park to clear that rather than the pitch. But who are we to decide what they do? But did you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the game should have been called. I think people had left early enough, and were, like you say, stuck in Perth or wherever they might have been. Like you say, the coverings should have probably been down. The pitch was in, decent condition for the most part, so that wouldn't have been an issue. I mean, even outside of the footballing authorities, I mean, I think, my perspective is someone who was travelling via bus from Edinburgh, why the M8 just seemed to be untouched for some strange reason was very confusing. If that had just been gritted and then had ploughs out early doors, there would have been no issues coming from that direction. But yeah, I thought it was a bit weird. A lot of limbo. There was an update at 11:15, then there was nothing, and then it was a delayed kickoff, and then it was a pitch inspection whilst the turnstiles opened, which was a bit. I don't know. It was just all a bit slapdash, really. With hindsight, I wish it got cancelled maybe, but yeah, no, it's because it was a full away end for the most part. We did end up giving away a few spares from our side of people who couldn't make it from various parts of the country, but so I'm glad a game of football got played in that perspective of everybody already being down. But yeah, just another just annoying sort of weather related issue with Scottish football. It was danger of being a Dundee 2.0.
Yeah, I think in general for the weekend, it was another farcical week for the SPFL. You look at Stenhousemuir getting stuck on their way to Cove. Yeah, Annan managed to get to Montrose and they got delayed till 5 o'clock kickoff. But of course, what tends to happen for Aberdeen in terms of away games, they always travel down the night before. So they were already, within the Glasgow area. So the team were always going to be able to get to the game on time. But I was like you, as soon as that announcement came that at 5-3 there would be a pitch inspection with the turnstiles opening 5 minutes later, I was like, it was beyond farcical if it was to then be called off. And then I think there was a slight concern with the amount of snow and the proximity to the edge of the pitch at one point as well. Although I did see someone note on social media that was maybe a clever tactic used by St Mirren to kind of throw off the Aberdeen players with the size of the pitch and make it feel a little bit more enclosed, which of course they're entitled to do. When the team news did eventually come out, Phil, there was 3 changes to the starting lineup. I have to admit, being extremely surprised. We spoke at length on the last episode about changes and the two up top with Topi and Duke, and do you change one, do you change both? Jimmy opted to change both, and he also opted to bring in Nielsen, as we widely expected, for Palaversa. Were you surprised to see him go with the three changes?
Uh, Slightly. I was kind of surprised that both wingers were dropped. I think outside of that, it was kind of how I expected. Like you say, kind of thought Nielsen would come in. I expected maybe Morris and Duke or Morris and Tope. But yeah, I think dropping both the wingers, obviously, again, hindsight's 2020, didn't really do anything for us. I think that wasn't really aided by the fact of, you know, the brighter spark really being Morris. But we just never really went down the right as much as we probably could have. But yeah, rather strange. I thought that both wingers were dropped.
Yeah, I thought, well, look, Morris, I thought had a good first half, but we were quiet down the left. I know we discussed this briefly on Saturday night, but I don't feel we get the best out of both Leighton Clarkson and Jamie McGrath when they're in the team together. We get the best out of them on an individual basis, and I know some might agree to disagree on that point, but I don't feel when they're both in, because one wants to be in behind the striker, and probably both aren't suited to being left wingers.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Really, they both try and do the same thing, and I find they kind of just end up just in too close a proximity to one another to actually be effective. Um, they both want to come deep for the ball. They both want to sort of drift into the spaces, and it just leaves the left with basically just Jack McKenzie attacking it. And he just wasn't really doing much of that the first half, I thought. And I think it's because it was so open that if he didn't get on the ball, you've got a storming counter attack with nobody left to cover that left hand side of the park. So yeah, I think it's one of those things where it might come off in a game where you're really dominating the ball, which we weren't doing at all in the first half. We just couldn't seem to get anything to stick. So yeah, it's not one that I'm really too keen on seeing consistently.
And I guess looking ahead a little bit towards Tuesday night, I'm sure we'll see some form of rotation in that forward area. And of course, Jimmy was very quick to react to what he saw in that first half by making the changes at halftime, which we will come on to. You spoke on the last episode about maybe being more nervous when you're in attendance at the game compared to watching. Callum spoke about how, we're getting to the busy end of the year. I don't want to say season, because obviously we're only halfway through. And this is where maybe things do get a bit nervy, tense, tricky, I think was maybe the word he used as well. It certainly felt nervy in terms of the way we started the game. Again, I saw fans of other teams speaking about how disruption to their schedules. I think, it was in relation to the Rangers Dundee United game, about how their preparation will have been kind of thrown out. I know Dunfermline also spoke about how their preparation for a delayed kickoff wasn't maybe where they would have wanted it to be. Do you think when you're a visiting team that a delayed kickoff and any kind of changes and like what we saw at the weekend affect you more rather than being a home player when you're surrounded by your home comforts ahead of the game? Because I certainly felt in that opening exchanges, we looked nervous. We were slack in possession in that midfield. I thought Shinnie and Nielsen both culpable of giving away possession cheaply. But we didn't look right, especially with some of that passing along the back line.
Yeah, I think there was a few things that came into play. Like you say, obviously the delayed kickoff, the Aberdeen team's probably either just milling about the St Mirren Stadium or they've gone back to the hotel. Obviously, that's not ideal, sitting waiting around. There's definitely a little bit of sort of, I guess, worry from the stands in a way. I mean, I know a lot of the discussion on our bus over was, if we've gone through all this rigmarole of trying to get to Paisley and we'll lose, that's going to be a sore one to take. I think that was on a lot of people's minds because it just was one of those ones where it felt like everything lined up to kind of be a bit of a sucker punch. But as well, I think a bit of credit's kind of got to be given to the way that St Mirren went about the game. I think they really disrupted it. From my perspective, especially the back line. It's one of those things. I think that was maybe one of the poorer performances that Malloy and Rubezic have put in together. But I think they're so used to getting their foot on the ball and teams pressing them, and St Mirren did really well to organise themselves and just let them do that. And I think that's where it forced us into these sort of long balls, forced us into trying to get the ball through the middle, which was never working because they were just so compact. I think it really threw off a lot of the Aberdeen players.
Yeah, and look, we're not going to sit here and make excuses for the defeat. I think we accept that the better team won on Saturday, and there might be Aberdeen fans that disagree with that sentiment, but I thought St Mirren were fully deserving. I thought they got their tactics spot on, especially in that first half where I thought they pressed us extremely well, and we didn't seem to either like it or know how to counter it. And I'm not meaning that on the manager, I'm meaning the players themselves. And for me, certainly, as I said, watching, and I know I had this discussion with Keith where he said he felt at the game it wasn't kind of how I was sensing it being at home. But I think in the sense of how well St Mirren played in that first half, as you said, they were tough to break down at times, and they looked to harry us on the ball. For all their efforts in that opening 15 minutes or so, we did well not to concede, despite St Mirren's best efforts. To then concede in the manner that we do is hugely frustrating. Route one football, there's always going to be questions around your centre backs conceding a goal like that. And it's a question that's always kind of sat over Ruby's head, I guess, and how he deals with balls over the top. You yourself spoke about it on the last episode that Olasanya will chase balls over the top and will use his pace to exploit Ruby and Malloy. And the first goal, all I could think of was, well, Phil called that midweek.
Yeah, I think everybody would have signposted Olasanya as a threat going forward because he's so electric. He is so electric, and he always plays on the shoulder, and that's going to cause problems, especially in the conditions as well. I mean, there was worries the pitch was going to be waterlogged. It looked rock hard. The ball was bouncing in all sort of ways that a sort of hard, almost frozen pitch would provide. Even before his goal, Malloy slips out on the his left hand side, but the St Mirren right wing, and Olasanya, gets a ball across the box, which I think resulted in a chance that just went past the post. But yeah, it's kind of a frustrating one, I guess, from both centre halves. I feel like, to me, it looks like Malloy gives up on the ball a little bit. He's maybe a bit too overconfident that Ruby's going to get there. He then, goes in a slight jog and goes, "Oh shit, I better try and get back goal side now." Ruby just gets, sixes and sevens and just doesn't quite know what to do with it, makes a feeble swing at it, which immediately stops his momentum. I mean, fair play to Olasanya, he took the goal well. But yeah, it was a real frustrating one, like I say, because we knew that was going to be something that St Mirren were going to try and utilise.
Yeah, Ruby looked like a young foal finding his feet for the first time as soon as he tried to. I don't even know what he was trying to do, if he was trying to get his foot across Olasanya or tried to go for the ball, but as you said, just stopped all momentum of him. And then Olasanya very composed to finish beyond Mitov and give St Mirren the lead. But as we've seen with this Aberdeen team, we do almost take the setback to get ourselves going. And we saw Shayden Morris, as you said, coming in from the start and being probably explosive down that right-hand side. But for most of the play in that right-hand side, every time he got, down to the byline and got the ball in the box, Sokler was not on the same wavelength that I feel Kevin Nisbet is with Shayden Morris, or none of the players were up with Shayden's pace. And I felt actually a bit sorry for Shayden at times in that first half because a lot of his good work was to no effect. He did have the beating of Tanzer on the left, and one time in particular when he had the beating of Tanzer, Alex Gogic won the ball and took Shayden Morris out in the same motion. I'm going to come to you obviously with being at the game. Did you think that was a red card being at the game?
Well, considering we were at the other end of the pitch, obviously the away end was outside the stadium for the first half. It looked like a red. It looks like Gogic has gone flying and studs up. Obviously, the conditions don't help. Me and John that I was standing next to spoke about it. Sort of say, it's the sort of pitch where you could have a red card today because someone's going to go in thinking it's a normal challenge and go absolutely flying at a million miles an hour. And I think that's what happened to Gogic. But obviously, looking back on it later, it's he's won the ball. Buchan's maybe fair in the sense of he has gone in quite quite forcefully. But again, I think that's probably more down to the pitch than anything
Mhm.
else. Um, but yeah, I was screaming for a red in the stadium until watching it back later and going, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's again one of the benefits of having people that have been at the stadium to having watched the game on TV, because I couldn't believe that that was a red card. I mean, I couldn't believe our luck and thought, and then you obviously remember that VAR is going to get involved and downgrade it. But the amusing thing from watching on TV was how much the St Mirren fans held that challenge against Shayden Morris. I mean, some of the language that was coming through on the TV coverage, God, there's a lot of angry people in Paisley. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah,
Um, but Shayden Morris, he wasn't buying that red card. He didn't go down injured. He rode the challenge very well, but look, it was John Beaton that brandished it, and I was actually a bit surprised to see a few Aberdeen fans kind of thinking, that certainly weren't at the game, that it was a red, because shoe being on the other foot, we'd be furious if that was a red. But yeah, I just thought for large parts of the first half, that final third really just didn't click.
yeah. I think that was kind of the story of the first half. Really, just everything felt quite lethargic for the most part. Nobody really seemed to want to kind of take the game, by the scruff of the neck a little bit and try and pull something off. Going back to Olasanya's first goal, you noticed how bobbly the goal mouths were, as it goes through meat of before it passes the line, it takes a massive bobble up.
Hmm.
And that was one thing where, we had 15 shots in the game, only four of them came from outside the box. There's numerous times where you're thinking, just drill one low on a pitch like this that's as hard as this and unpredictable as this. Even if you're forcing, a rebound back out to somebody, it's better than just trying to just doing that sort of side to side, no real penetration. Because St Mirren were happy with that. They didn't really mind too much of us holding on to the ball because we weren't really doing anything to cause threat in that first half.
Yeah, and I think the more you deliver balls into the box, the more probably comfortable they were going to be with that, because that's what they were expecting. And I think you're absolutely right in those conditions, whether it be the pitch, whether it be a player slips, or the keeper as well. You've got to kind of play to that. And I think for Jimmy Tilleen's credit, his post match comments are exceptional in the sense that he was very honest and open about it, despite probably some of Rob McLean's questioning, which very much looked like it was irking him. He accepted that the Saints were sharper in the final third. They got things right that we didn't, and we have to go away and look at our performance and how we can improve. But also acknowledging that we are still a work in progress. I think a lot of us, if we're being brutally honest, we are ahead of where we expected to be at this stage in the season. And, as Lee Mayer kept reminding us on Red TV's commentary, St Mirren is a hard place to go. Just because we haven't won there in 6 years doesn't mean it's an Aberdeen thing. An Aberdeen thing. Other teams find it equally as difficult. And I think, given our form, a lot of us, despite that record, were expecting us to rock up and claim 3 points and move on to Hibs on Tuesday. But we've faced the first. This is a bump in the road. This isn't a bubble burst moment that a lot of St Mirren fans seem to be riding. And I think the interesting thing, of course, from our point of view, is how we react to that. But it was the honesty from Tulane afterwards that was like, okay, we've got, as I think you said on your own social media, was we've got a leader here that knows how to regroup these players to that effect.
Yeah, exactly that. It's one of those ones. You dust yourself off, you get back on the horse, you go again on Tuesday night, and I think that's the exact way that Jimmy's gonna have the players approaching the next game. But yeah, it was very weird some of the takes I was seeing, especially from St Mirren fans. It was all about Aberdeen, and it wasn't until after the game I realised sort of how good of a run St Mirren's been on, and I don't
Mhm.
think any St Mirren fans were crediting themselves with that. The Aberdeen game took them to 10 points, one out of the possible 12. That's
Yeah.
ridiculously good run for a St Mirren team. And I felt like just everything was just about Aberdeen and how that's came to an end, despite being 13 points behind with 2 games in hand. Very strange, but not for me to comment too much on. But yeah, I think it's one of those ones where I think Jimmy will keep the head. I think the fans have got to keep the head. And we'll see what happens come Tuesday night. I'm sure it'll be a reinvigorated and revitalised team.
Yeah, and obviously, like I mentioned about Rob McLean's line of questioning potentially irking Jimmy Tilleen, it reminded me why I tend to watch games on the opposition commentary instead of Red TV, because at full time, Rob McLean saying that at least we only lost 1 point compared to 3 points to Rangers. And I'm like, well, why are we thinking about, them gaining 1 point on us? I'm more disappointed that we haven't picked up 1 point or three in that situation. So yeah, it will remind me for Tuesday night what commentary to watch, and I think certainly Tuesday night's opposition commentary could be quite interesting depending how the game goes, of course. You spoke there about dusting yourselves down and going again, and Jimmy did that at half time. I think not for the first time this season. There will have been a few harsh words said in the dressing room at halftime about the level of performance. And for me, I think that was the biggest disappointment if I look at the 90 minutes as a whole. Yes, we had spells where we were good, but overall, I think our performance was significantly below par. But we're at games such as potentially Hearts at home, Dundee away that stick out for me, where we didn't perform to our best, but we came away with 3 points. Unfortunately, Saturday was probably one game too many that's now caught up with us. But once again, we saw in the opening exchanges of that second half the benefits and influences that the changes Jimmy Tilleen makes on the Aberdeen team.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was the right changes to be made. Sockler, well, admittedly, wasn't really getting much sort of service anyway, but wasn't really doing much with what he had. Um, Likewise with Clarkson, it was going to be one of Clarkson or McGrath that was going to have to go.
Yeah.
Obviously, again with hindsight, it was the right decision made. Obviously, with McGrath grabbing the equaliser. But yeah, like I said, I think we all knew that our luck was going to sort of run out at some point. I think we'd rode it quite excessively. But yeah, I think like you said, I think the frustrating thing was kind of the peaks and troughs really of our performance. Like you say, getting that momentum swing and equaliser, and then immediately just not really doing anything to capitalise on it, going sort of
Mhm.
back into the same sort of thing and letting St Mirren come back into the game, and sort of get their foot on the ball a bit more again. So yeah, but glad he did react in the way he did and make the changes.
Yeah, and I thought Duke was superb in that opening exchanges of the second half. And really, the equaliser was all down to the good work from him. And I mean, that's probably, I spoke previously about Kevin Nisbet being up there for assist of the season. That's definitely going to be the weirdest assist of the season, I think, and I'm sure he'll be claiming it for sure. But at that point, when you get yourself back to 1-1, you've got Duke on one wing, Morris on the other. I thought, we're, as you said, going to grab this game by the horns and really take charge. But much like the first half, I thought we just kept our attacks down to one side. I didn't kind of see us use much variation until we brought Topi Keskinen on. But unfortunately, Duke began to get influenced by the West End and the torrent of abuse that was being directed his way when they were getting bored of abusing Graham Shinney. And then Jimmy had to swap wings for the two wingers. I just thought maybe we could have spread the ball a little bit better, because at times we maybe became a little bit predictable. And I think, again, I saw comments around that in the way that St Mirren maybe managed to work us out quicker than any other team has so far. And again, it was just, I guess, one of those days for us. And I still don't want to take too much away from St Mirren, but I think, as I said, our level of performances just weren't quite there. It was definitely an off day for far too many of our players.
Yeah, I think going on to the sort of wingers, there was a few things that kind of frustrated me a little bit about our wing play. I think first and foremost, it was nowhere near as quick as it has been for a majority of the season. I felt there were so many times where we just slowed the play down far too much, and it just allowed St Mirren to just reset into that shape that they were so comfortable in for the whole game. Similarly, I just felt like everything was right to feet. There was nothing going towards a channel. And again, like we said, on a pitch like that, something into a channel, somebody goes flying in, you're picking up a free kick in a good position, potentially looking at red cards, or even just a defender losing their footing and someone getting in behind. It's similar. As good as Duke was when he came on, like you say, I just think he let the fans and also himself just get into his own head far too much when he got that one decision that went against him for the foul, went flying in on Marcus Fraser. Okay, Fraser doesn't get touched, makes the most of it. Duke gets booked, and
Mm-hmm.
it just, you saw it affect his game far more than it needed to at that point. You could just see him getting ever more frustrated with it. Um, but yeah, again, like I say, nothing to take away from St Mirren. They were organised
They
exactly how they
were.
had to be.
Yeah, they were, and like you said, I think you're spot on in that assessment of Duke. When and that's where I was meaning. It was after that incident where Jimmy Tilleen quickly swapped him to the right wing and moved Topi over to the left. But I was chatting to Ian Watson during the game, and he pointed out Nielsen's substitution, and he felt we were significantly weaker once Nielsen went off. Whereas I personally felt kind of throughout the game in the 90 minutes, I just didn't think that midfield two, whether it was Nielsen or Shinnie or Palaversa and Shinnie, ever got the cohesion that we've been used to in the midfield. And I think for me, that was the disappointing thing. And I think it was just, we knew a defeat was going to come. I think the thing that annoyed me most about the weekend was it was just the levels weren't where we've seen throughout the season so far. And I know that this team is capable of far more. I'm sure they know it as well. I just hope that we get that reaction then on Tuesday as well. And I think a lot of people are managing to stay grounded, as I've said already, because we are so far ahead of the curve that we expected to be at this stage of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you say, it's a testament to how good we've been up to this point. We've seen, arguably maybe not even the peak of this team with the amount of sort of injuries that key injuries that we've had. But we've seen performances that would merit finishing second place, and it's frustrating that with those have dropped the same way as the past few weeks. We maybe spoke about Nielsen, and the fact that he's playing a game that's probably pretty good for most players, but looks subpar to us because he has been
Mm-hmm.
so good and so consistent throughout the season. So, I think this is where a lot of people on social media have said it. We're going to say it. I think everybody's going to say it for the most part, is that we do need to try and keep grounded. It's not a bubble burst. It's not a reflection on the mentality of this team that all was going to go. It was just a matter of when. Personally, it's probably more preferable it's came against St Mirren than against the likes of a Hearts or Hibs, because that would arguably be more frustrating in terms of a sort of goading perspective. But yeah, like I say, I think it's important that we see how the team reacts from loss. We said this
Mm-hmm.
after the Celtic game. Okay, that was probably a worse loss than we would have enjoyed, but how this team handles their first league loss is going to be really important. In sort of showcasing how we're going to continue for the rest of the league season, because more losses are going to come. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about how we handle them and learn from them.
Yeah, and I guess so. It was St Mirren away that was going to be the real test, and I
Mm-hmm.
think you're right in terms of rebounding, because of course we're going into the game on Tuesday as heavy favourites. I think for most people will view as that, and Hibs in all sorts of trouble, which we'll come on to, and then we go to another venue where our record is equally as bad as it is in Paisley in Tynecastle. So there will be these little dark trolls of the West Coast media ready to pounce on Aberdeen if things don't go right on Tuesday as well, heaven forbid. But this is where the fans are playing such a crucial role, as well as the players in their reaction as well, because in adversity we've got to stick with the team just as much. But I think you spoke about the efforts that the fans made to get to the game on Saturday. I felt that frustration for the likes of yourself and other people. There's some guys I know that even had to turn back because the conditions were just too bad and not worth the risk. and for the level of performance that the players then put in. For me, I felt more frustrated for the fans that had gone through that effort, and that's, I think, for where my frustration was. But what was your thoughts on that midfield performance, to kind of go back to that original point I was trying to make?
Yeah, I think said it midweek. The midfield battle was going to decide the game, and I just feel like we just weren't really doing much with it. Like I was sort of saying on the wing play, there was nothing that was really going in behind. Everything was very side to side in trying to stretch St Mirren, which again they were quite comfortable in not biting to really.
Yeah.
Similarly to the press, they were quite content to press when they wanted to press and not be dragged into going super high all the time. Um, yeah, admittedly the midfield had nothing really going forward. There was no, just a very static team for the most part. I felt like there could have been far more movement, which maybe would have helped the midfield show themselves in a better light. But yeah, just a bit frustrating. Like you say, because the performances that likes of Nielsen, Shinnie, Palaversa have all put in have been superb this season. So it was kind of a little bit annoying to see that drop.
Yeah, I actually thought in the first half, I was like, we really need a Palaversa on to kind of put his foot on the ball and control midfield. And when he came on, even that wasn't going the way I was expecting. So it was really just one of those days, I guess, for a few players. But it was one of those days yet again for Aberdeen in conceding from set pieces, because zonal marking again kind of coming to our detriment, and we shoot ourselves in the foot by failing to defend a set piece. And again, as much as I speak about a frustration in the sense of the performance towards the fans, another huge frustration is the fact that the 2 goals that St Mirren did score, for all they did right, the goals were pretty much handed to them. It was one ball over the top that we couldn't defend, and then we allow a centre back a free header. It's inexcusable when a game is so tight like that as well. But the more you watch the second goal back, the more disappointing it is. There's people just watching. There's people not reacting. Mitov, for me as well, isn't really strong enough, kind of gets caught up with whoever the St Mirren player is kind of in front of him. And I don't know if he's trying to look for a free kick. It's just a really sloppy goal again.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how many weeks I've said it now on this podcast, is my absolute disdain for zonal marking, and I will always have a disdain for it. Just an absolute calamity of errors. Post goal, there was somebody trying to claim for a climb. Taylor used his own man for leverage. That was just clever. 4 players around Taylor. One of them jumps, which I think was Malloy, who was, I think, the first man of the 4, jumps. It's miles over his head. Nobody else then reacts to it. Even looking around, there's 2 extra St Mirren players that are just sitting in space in the box. If it bounces out for a rebound, they're probably licking their lips and smashing it in anyway. So yeah, overall, just kind of like you say, shooting ourselves in the foot for that goal. Really, a 6'2" centre half just put somebody on him. A little bit of accountability, because I feel like a lot of players in a zonal system just can't make a decision because they're so focused on, oh, it's my zone, this is my zone, yeah. It's not, and I think if you just go man to man, somebody's on him. If he doesn't track him, if he doesn't jump with him, that's on them, and there's not really much you can do outside of that. But yeah, it just a bit of an annoying one to take, like you say, especially with us improving in the second half compared to the first, and you were just kind of willing us on to try and find that winner.
Yeah, no, and it's not obviously the first time we've let a big towering centre back have a free header. Obviously, we did that at Hampden, but as much as I was maybe a bit annoyed at Mitov for kind of his part in the goal, he also came up clutch earlier with a huge save to deny St Mirren, which looked at an inevitable goal once again. But unfortunately, like we were speaking about in terms of luck being on our side, this time his heroics didn't benefit us. And again, Duke seems destined not to find the back of the net at present. I think he hit the bar, it was against Hearts, and I think that would have probably been up there for goal of the season had that found the back of the net on Saturday. I don't think I've seen anybody backheel the ball from about 10 yards out and then hit the post. That was just desperately unlucky, and probably actually when that comes off the post and doesn't find its way in, you just know it's not going to be your day.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the moment where I was kind of consigned to the fact that we weren't picking anything up. We were on the right hand side of the stand. So from where we were, it looked like it was going perfectly, just right off the exact point of the post you need to bounce back in. Um, but yeah, it was really unlucky not to have that goal. But yeah, like I say, it was a frustrating afternoon, and I think that's the thing. A lot of fans in the stand were frustrated. We were, you know, maybe letting that out. I know I, for one, was getting quite annoyed at Topi not getting the ball into the box when we're 2-1 down and dribbling it across the 20-yard line. But, credit to everybody there. Full time whistle goes, and everybody's still willing the team on after the whistle and clapping them off the field. So I think that's a big thing. Like you were saying earlier, we've really got to stick with the players, and I think that was kind of shown by the travelling support on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that there because obviously, as I said, you kind of the fans have to stick with the team because there's going to be sections of the media waiting to shoot us down, and I thought that was very nice to see at full time, that togetherness from the fans. Obviously appreciating what the players had done, but equally the players appreciating the efforts that the fans had put in to get to the game as well. And I think, for those with Red TV, I think Nielsen also echoes the same sentiment that Jimmy Tillene came out with. And I noticed some of the more level-headed St Mirren fans appreciating the after-match thoughts of Jimmy Tillene. If only Stephen Robinson showed so much decorum from their trip to Pittodrie earlier in the season. But it's the first notch in the loss column. Let's hope we bounce back on Tuesday against Hibs. So before we speak about the Hibs game, Phil, I want to speak about the financial results, which came out 7 o'clock. First thing I saw when I woke up on Saturday morning. The club announcing the financial results. Very deep showed that the club posted just over 800,000 loss for the year, which some fans might find a bit concerning given the fact that we had the influx of European money. We got, of course, the League Cup final, Scottish Cup semi-finals, but the finances don't, of course, include the record sale of Bojan Miovski, nor do they take into effect the record ticket sales, I suppose, we've seen recent with 4 home sellouts in a row, and a fantastic commercial sales to this season as well. I think pretty much every matchday sponsorship sold out for this entire season, and the work the commercial team seem to be doing at the club is going, above and beyond. But did you have any kind of concerns when you saw that small loss, or overall pretty much happy with the financial state of the club?
Yeah, no, overall pretty happy. I think there's lots of factors that can play into the fact there's a loss. We've got additional costs with the women's team turning into more full time contracts. The youth team obviously getting more spending with the sort of success they've had, and as well the fact for it to pay off Barry Robson, pay Neil Warnock, potentially that includes compensation paid for Jimmy as well. There's reasons they could be that loss, and like you say, it doesn't include the Miovski money. It doesn't include the Baron money, which at this rate might be on the 2030 accounts, depending on when we get paid. So there's a plethora of reasons, but I don't think we've got any cause to concern. I think Cormac and co have shown that they are businessmen at the end of the day. They know how to run a business, and I think they've ran Aberdeen pretty soundly so far from a sort of financial perspective.
Yeah, and I think another big takeaway as well is the decrease we've managed to put into our wage bill, which maybe says a lot. You obviously mentioned Neil Warnock. How much was that a financial failure? But also maybe some of the other signings that we previously had, how high earners were they in comparison to what we've got just now? So there are small kind of segues that we're doing to keep ourselves on a better financial footing, and the club is in a certainly better place than it was 2 or 3 years ago. But one kind of interesting kind of subplot from the financial statement, for those that have done a deep dive into it, will have been the money set aside for the new stadium and the kind of comments that surround it. The club saying that, certainly for the short to medium term, the club won't be going anywhere from Pittodrie. I don't think that will come as a surprise to any Aberdeen fan, especially with the local council, that we're not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But with the club maybe looking towards exploring other options, I thought it was a bit interesting that there was again seemed to be some sort of mention around Kingsford and exploring the options there. I hope to God that doesn't happen. Obviously for me, if we can't redevelop Pittodrie, the club and the council can come together and agree on, continuing this beach regeneration project with the club at the heart of it down there, in a new stadium. If, as I said, if Pittodrie is completely off the table for redevelopment.
Yeah, I think Kingsford's going to be just a dying cause. There's always going to be objections, not only from residents, but I think from majority of fans as well. But on the flip side, between the council, and I suppose depending on the financial footing of the club, getting a new stadium at the beach might also prove to be rather challenging, and even then objections as well, because there'll be plenty of people that won't want their tax getting used to fund a football team they don't go and watch, etc. So, yeah, really interesting, and I think the stadium talk is something that's going to rumble on for a few more eons potentially.
Potentially, but that's a discussion for another day. So we'll move on to the here and now, and it's back to first team action in midweek as the Dons travel down to Edinburgh for the first time this week, as of course we return to the capital on Sunday. So effectively 2 home games this week for you, Phil. That must be refreshing.
It's quite nice. I'm going to miss the Tynecastle trip because I'll actually be in Aberdeen, ironically enough. So I'll be going the opposite way. But yeah, no, I'll be heading over Tuesday night. A wee tram jaunt over to Leith from my neck of the woods. So yeah, looking forward to it. Hopefully David Gray is still in charge, and hopefully the same calamitous display as they had on Saturday against Dundee as well.
Yeah, hopefully David Gray's in charge and hopefully Bursic remains in goals. And that will immediately fill me with confidence that the Dons can return to winning ways. But I guess when you go into a game on the back of defeat, and from a Hibs point of view, go into a game with your manager teetering on the edge of collecting his P45, where does the expectation and pressure really lie then?
I think probably lies with us. I think the media would like it to lie with us. Um, maybe a potential jobs for the boys and David Gray getting kept on a little bit longer and taking the flack away from him a little bit. But yeah, it's a weird one. It can either galvanise Hibs or, the first bad pass they make, everyone's on their back and they'll capitulate, and we can hopefully ramp home a quite convincing win. So it'll be an interesting one because, again, the amount of discussions I've had with people, Hibs, Hearts likewise as well, they've got too good of a squad to be in the position that they're in. There are good players there. So it's a case of will they actually show up to the players that they're meant to be on Tuesday night. If they do, it'll make the game a lot more interesting than I think a lot of people think it will be.
And certainly, if there's any stoppages in the game on Tuesday night, I'm sure a few people's eyes will be turning to Ellie Yuan and seeing how many keepy ups he can pull off before the game restarts. But I think it's interesting because you speak about Hibs and maybe having a squad that's too good to be down there. Are they a squad, though? That would be my question for any Hibs fans tuning into this episode, because from the outside looking in, they're probably more of a team of individuals rather than a team playing, certainly for their manager at this moment in time. And again, from games like these, it feels like the first goal is going to be so important, especially from an Aberdeen point of view when we're the visiting team and coming into the game off a defeat. Because if we were to, rock up to Easter Road and score within the first 5-10 minutes, I think you're absolutely spot on. The natives will immediately get restless, depending, of course, how many actually bother to turn up on Tuesday night, given the ridiculous pricing for this game as well. But I think from an Aberdeen point of view, that early goal will just, ease any nerves and cancel any frustration out from the midweek, and it's hopefully back into the groove and normality of Jimmy Tillene's sexy Dons.
Yeah, I'm hoping there's going to be no hangover from Saturday. The way that Jimmy is, you'd like to think that's not going to be the case. Even if we do maybe have a little wobbly start or maybe aren't as assertive as we'd like to be, it's not going to affect the players that much. You'd like to think they'll come in as composed as they have been for everything bar Saturday, and really just play our brand of football, play Jimmy's football, and like I say, with this the sort of shape that Hearts have been in recently, you'd like to think that if we can sort of get on that front foot, press them high, put them under pressure, you could be looking at a really nice scoreline, potentially similar to the game towards the end of last season where Fletcher Boyd got his first Dons goal.
Yeah, and I think, we can't, think that Dundee scored four at the weekend, so we'll be doing the same because, of course, it's a different game, different circumstances that occurred during the game as well with Jordan Abita's red card. I don't actually know if that means he's suspended for the visit on Tuesday. We'll see, I guess, when the lineups. I haven't actually looked into it that much. We're recording it on Sunday night, which is unusual for us given the quick turnaround. So I've actually given up Red Zone to record this episode. That's how dedicated I am to the cause. From an Aberdeen point of view, again, we saw 3 changes at the weekend. Do you think there'll be similar numbers for Tuesday night? We already spoke about squad rotation for this week, but regardless of rotation, do you think performance from the weekend may see a similar number of changes going into the game?
Yeah, I can see one of McGrath or Clarkson probably dropping to the bench. I think having both them on might not be a game that it suits. I think my big question marks maybe over the centre halves, whether one of them drops out. They didn't shower themselves in glory on Saturday. Obviously, with the amount of games that are coming up in this period and the risks of suspensions, are you looking at maybe Angus MacDonald getting his warm up, ploughing snow the other day to get into the starting 11? Nisbet as well against his former club. You're maybe looking at him coming in instead of Sockler. So I think it'll be interesting. I think the midfield, especially, will be one to watch and see what sort of way Jimmy wants to go about it. Whether he goes with the flat 3 like we've spoken about before, whether he goes with the 2 sitting in the 10, and overall, who out of maybe Shinnie or Nilsson drops, because I don't think both of them are going to get dropped. I think you're probably only looking at one of them.
Yeah, on Angus MacDonald, absolutely mental. He goes all the way down there and doesn't even get a place in the team. And his biggest contribution was probably more than some of the St Mirren ground staff did in shoveling the snow. I don't see us changing that midfield pairing of Nielsen and Shinnie. For me, I think he's going to give them another chance. I guess it depends on the extent of Nielsen's injury. I know he came off the back of a head clash. I'm assuming that change was already in the pipeline anyway, with Palaversa waiting. Maybe it was going to be for Graham Shinnie since he'd already picked up a booking, and the Nielsen injury forced a change in that. I guess that's one for the likes of Chris Harvey and Tyrone Smith to pick up for the press conference tomorrow. For me, I'd like to see Kevin Nisbet come in, and I think it would be hugely ironic if Kevin Nisbet is the match winner on Tuesday night, a former Hibs hero, being the one that ends up another Hibs hero's time in charge of the club. So I would personally like to see Kevin Nisbet start, and I would also like to see one of Topi or Duke starting on the wing in place of Clarkson. Whether or not Shaden Morris retains his place remains to be seen. I don't really have anything against him being dropped. I also think in terms of the centre backs, I don't see any changes there. I think he's going to continue as is. I think this kind of takes back the discussions me and Callum had years back, probably when the podcast was in its infancy, when we were moaning about centre backs. And if we were to start dropping centre backs based on the performance from the weekend, it just doesn't instill any confidence or faith into them. I think Thielen's the type of manager that's going to, put an arm around the shoulder of both of them and say, look, you've made your mistake. Go out and show me why you've got that starting jersey and prove that it was, a mistake. Because look, we're all human at the end of the day. Me and you will probably go into work tomorrow and make a mistake, or someone will have found a mistake that we did last week. Unfortunately, when you're a footballer, you've got thousands of people ready to critique that mistake, and you've got idiots like us that will come and discuss it to thousands of people on a podcast as well, thinking that we could do a better job than them, when in reality they're on the pitch for a reason and we're behind the mics for another reason as well. So I don't see him making the changes at centre back, but maybe going to Tynecastle if there was to be another mistake in either one of their lockers.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, you can speak for yourself on doing the job front. I'll have Player of the Year. Angus MacDonald asked me to play centre half with him, so speak for yourself, Glenn. No, I don't think it was maybe more of a case of performance. I think, like you said, I think Ruby's still one booking away from suspension. So maybe he does start against Hibs because you're maybe wanting him suspended against Hearts instead of Celtic, perhaps. But you never know. Angus MacDonald could pull out some more Celtic heroics once more on the fourth. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Like I've said many times before, Jimmy could put Ross Doohan at centre forward and probably go, yeah, solid team, best we could produce. Because I think he is a man that we can all have confidence in, and like I've said, he's definitely a leader and the sort of person that could easily rally the squad on the back of anything.
Yeah, I'm just surprised you weren't starting the rallying call for Jack Milne again. But
Oh.
I think, I think going into Tuesday, it is about how we react. I think we just have to, and I'm sure Jimmy Talline's going to say the same in his press conferences. We can't focus on the noise surrounding this Hibs team and David Gray. We just have to, turn up and focus on our own job and play to our strengths and hope that does the job to bring the 3 points back up to AB24 and get yet another unbeaten run underway. And yeah, it would be a perfect place to start. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, we head to Tynecastle, a venue where we haven't had the best of results in recent times as well. And I think, getting that loss shaken off and getting that feel good factor, because that's one thing you don't want when we've got the visit of Celtic a week on Wednesday coming up, is for a couple of unexpected results to creep in, and then that kind of doubt, which is the fickle nature of football fans, to start creeping in ahead of what still will shape up to be a huge game if we keep our own focus and get back to winning ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've said, it's a case of getting back on the horse as quickly as possible and how you react to defeat. So doing it, at the next possible opportunity is the ideal scenario for Aberdeen.
Well, Phil, let's see on Tuesday night if it is the ideal scenario and the Dons do take advantage of a team in disarray in Hibs and claim those 3 points. I will be back later on in the week with Callum, reacting to the events from Easter Road and previewing that trip to Tynecastle as well. If you've been watching this podcast on YouTube, remember to leave a like, comment your thoughts in the description as well. Also, if you've been listening on audio as well, follow us on that audio platform, leave a review. And I think now on Spotify, you can also leave your comments surrounding the games on the episodes as well. So feel free to do that. Until next time.